What the crap is going on with the Joker in Batman? I'm going to get to that in a minute. Got a couple other things to hit on first. I'm Peter Franson from christiangeekcentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions. Welcome to Essential Issues Weekly, where I talk about DC Comics 1 week after their release on the Ultra tier of the DC Universe Infinite subscription service. In each installment, I pick an assortment of comics to talk about as a DC fan, also exploring what, if anything, they have to say about the essential issues of real life. Not sure there's anything of that nature necessarily this time around, mostly nerdy stuff I want to dig into. But hey, full spoiler warning right now. Everything this is your first and only warning. Many spoilers lie ahead. Right now, we're taking a look at comics originally released to the Ultra tier on March 5th, 2024, and originally published February 6th. First, from that group, just some brief thoughts on Red Hood, The Hill, number 0. I really want the Red Hood as a character to be interesting to me. And there was just some stuff going on with Red Hood and the Outlaws that I didn't like, but I mean, I did want to kind of invest in Red Hood some more. I think Jason Todd is an interesting character with a very rich background in the DC universe. But this book was not really pulling me in. I think there was just too many characters all over the place, too many new names and stuff. And what I really would have wanted, if they're going to try and get me to invest in Red Hood, which it seems like, Red Hood, The Hill, I assume this is maybe a miniseries and this is the 0 issue to start it off, or maybe it's an attempt at ongoing, I don't know. But either way, this does not feel like an issue 0. It feels like I am lost in the middle of, all kinds of lore and continuity. Or if these are brand new characters, I feel like they're introducing way too many at the same time. And I'd really like something that just takes me into Jason Todd's brain and gets into what drives him, rather than presuming that I'm going to be interested in him from the get-go and then just throw a bunch of supporting cast at me that I'm not really ready for. So I don't know, maybe I'll check out issue number 1 and maybe hope that this was kind of an anomaly, but I was not feeling it so far. Also not feeling Kneel Before Zod number 2, mostly for the same reasons that I mentioned about issue number 1, namely that I don't really understand Zod's motivation. Kneel Before Zod, of course, that is a phrase from the classic Christopher Reeve Superman 2, but that was a different time where villains were not as complex and didn't really need to be compared to today, where, some people I'm sure are fine with a non-complex, mustache-twirly, I must dominate type of villain, but I'm definitely not interested in that. I want something. It's not that I need to relate to them and feel like, oh, they're actually a good person, they just had a number of bad things happen to them. It's not that I need that. That can be interesting as a villain, but I think villains can also alternatively function as a cautionary tale where we don't excuse their behavior, but it's relatable enough that they can warn us as readers, like, you know what, this is a path that if we allow ourselves, we could go down, and I don't feel like either of those is the case with Zod. And again, I'll compare this take on Zod to the Man of Steel take, which really had a developed motivation for Zod that was somewhat relatable, even though obviously he went off the deep end and really was kind of insane. But there was something there that I could kind of relate to. There was a complexity to him that I just want in this version of Zod, and I'm still not seeing it. Not only that, but his son left in issue 1 is doing what is Sinister Sons is a series with him and the son of Sinestro that's going to, I guess, develop that character. But the son of Zod was the one thing that was kind of potentially interesting to me from a character standpoint, and now it just seems clear that, oh no, they just talked about him enough to get him out of the picture, and now it's just Ursa and Zod and him, her not being happy with him being dominating enough. So I don't really understand either of these characters, so I think at this point I am out for the rest of Kneel Before Zod. The book that I want to focus on that really got my attention this week was Batman 142, subtitled The Joker Year 1 Part 1. And I felt lost at the very beginning of this issue. It opens up with Batman doing some kind of an autopsy on what looks like the body of the Joker, but he says, this body isn't yours, I'm not going to get closure here. And I just felt lost. And I was trying to figure out why I felt lost. I know my memory is crappy, but eventually, in the middle of a second read-through of this issue, I went back and looked at the last issue, and I was like, oh yeah, that's right. We were in the middle of the story of Batman basically on the run or having been taken down, just totally overmatched against Zur-Anar, who was his alternate backup personality that had somehow now been downloaded or inhabited and now inhabits the body of Failsafe, the android that Batman created to take him down should the need ever arise. And so just this unstoppable foe, and he's in the middle of dealing with all that, and then he winds up kind of battered and beaten and wakes up and the Joker is there, and Batman's like, okay, you got to tell me what your connection is to all of this business. And Joker says, you know what, Bruce? I think I'll do just that. And that was the end of the issue. And then we wake up here, and I'm like, wait a minute. Okay, are we not in the cell anymore? Where are we in DC history right now that Batman is doing this autopsy? And there's no indication to me of when this is. Is this the future? Is this the past, but before the whole Zur-Anar failsafe stuff? I have no idea. So Batman is musing to himself and says, years ago I confirmed that Red Mask inadvertently created triplicates of the Joker. So what didn't he tell me all those years ago during that prison confession? And man, I really would like them to employ the practice of a little box in the corner that references an issue that I can go and read. Because I do remember some of this. I remember Jeff Johns, I think it was, was it the Watchmen prequel or something, The Button? I can't remember what it was, but there was this implication that like there are 3 Jokers, and then that was left alone for a good while, and then they did kind of like a Black Label comic. Is that in continuity? Is it not? And then more recently it seemed that, okay, yes it is, but we're trimming things down back to 1 Joker again. I think that's where we last left off on the whole 3 Jokers thing. So I would just have liked a reference, especially in this age of DC Universe Infinite, where they're so accessible to jump around to whatever you want to read if you're on the subscription platform. And so I'm just like begging, like, oh my gosh, why is there not a reference here for something I can go and refresh my memory on? Because again, I feel lost in what Bruce is talking about here. I don't even remember who the Red Mask is. Is that the guy in the parallel reality that he was talking? Well, but then why is he saying all those years ago? I don't know. Does that mean this little autopsy is taking place in the future? And so what happened recently in the comics would have been all those years ago? Again, I feel lost. Then we jump to what increasingly becomes clear to be a flashback. And we're now following the Joker's internal narration. And that maybe in and of itself is one thing that I'm not thrilled about with this issue. I don't know that I want to be taken inside the Joker's mind. I would be more interested in being taken inside of his mind before he became the Joker. But once he snaps, once he becomes the Joker, I really kind of like the sense of almost a Lovecraftian fear about the Joker, where he is not able to be understood. And so once you start putting his thoughts into coherent sentences, there is a lessening in my mind of his madness. There is a lessening of the chaos swirling in his mind, and there's something of the mystique taken away from him. So I'm interested in the idea of exploring more deeply his origins, but I guess I would like it done in a different way, where we're not taken into his thoughts, which, as this issue goes on, seem kind of pedestrian at times. It seems that in his mind, when he had just become the Joker, there's a part of him that's saying, don't do this, don't go nuts, just settle down and, stop laughing, please just be fine. And so there's, the sense in which the Joker we know has not completely and fully formed at this time. And I guess I'm open to that at some point, but then we're going to have to establish in this story kind of a second catalyst that really snaps him into the mythical, unknowable madness that is the Joker. Otherwise, the idea that he always has this voice in his head that's trying to reason with him, trying to bring him back from madness, I'm not into that. I want the Joker to be just so completely far gone and unknowable. I don't want that for all villains, but for the Joker I do. There's something over the years about the fact that you can't understand him that makes him scarier. It's that fear of the unknown or the unknowable that kind of connects with me. Then in his flashback, we've got, as he's coming out of the river for the first time, having his skin dyed white, seemingly 2 other Jokers in this moment of his origin story walk up to him. And then they start fight. One of them at least starts fighting him, choking him, beating him up. Then the other one joins in, and really the way this scene ends, it just kind of ends, and I don't really understand who is left. Okay, so did the guy who actually came out of the vat of chemicals? Did he just get killed in this scene? But we don't see. We cut away. And that's another thing. Like the stuff that seems to be communicated in some of these scenes, before we can understand really what is being said, what is being revealed here, it cuts away to a new scene. And I'm okay with that. I get that this is probably going to be a slow burn, a multi-issue story arc, but one too many things that are confusing at some point just kind of take me away from intrigued and keep me at a distance from like the story and just kind of make me want to throw up my hands. In the very next scene, we see a Joker walk up to his former wife, fiance, lover, I'm not sure what it is, but I seem to remember in the Joker's backstory, according to Alan Moore, he was a failed comedian. And so that must be this Joker here. Is he also the one that came out of the vat of chemicals or not? This, I always had a problem with the idea of three Jokers. It just seemed to be making the concept of Joker too busy and took away some of that purity. So then we see 6 months later, that one of these Jokers has been in an apartment, maybe just sitting there for a while, to the point where he's got really long hair and a green beard. I'm like, I don't know. Maybe if it was a different story, this wouldn't be one more thing I would pile on and say, I'm not sure I like this, but with the rest of the book reading like it does, I'm like, yeah, I don't know if I like this. I don't know, something about the Joker having to shave and do something as normal as that. Again, it takes away from kind of the sense of myth and the pureness of how I see the Joker. I mean, like the next scene, are we going to see him like on the toilet taking a dump, having a really bad stomach flu? I don't know if I want to know that the Joker has those experiences. But anyway, as he's kind of prepping to go out, painting his skin normal flesh tone color, he's looking at his reflection in the mirror and seeing the Red Hood there, which would seem to indicate to me that, okay, this is the Joker that actually was the Red Hood that fell in the vat, that got his skin stained. But then that doesn't explain what happened. I thought he was getting choked out by the other two Jokers. So again, no resolution to that, no idea really what's going on. I mean, of course, there is the possibility that the other two Jokers are just in the Joker's head. They're just figments of his imagination. But then we did have a story, I believe not too long ago, where there was more than one Joker clearly in different places at the same time, although one of them was revealed to be kind of a lesser knockoff Joker, I think, at some point, that the Joker himself made, which would fly in the face, I guess, of this origin story, because this implies that the other two Jokers were there right when the Joker became the Joker. But if they're figments in his mind, then I guess we could have 3 mental Jokers and up to 3 physical Jokers. Again, muddying the waters and making the Joker concept even more busy than I think it needs to be. Muddying the waters of clarity again. Right after this scene that's still taking place in like the early years of Batman, we cut away to a scene that is using clearly a new artist, or at least an art style, kind of painted looking, and talking about the Joker. And this is Batman's narration now, saying we couldn't solve the Joker, so we locked him away in Arkham, hooked up to a machine. Barbara's idea after she became commissioner. Okay, pump the brakes. So we cannot be back in the early days of Batman anymore, right? Didn't Barbara become commissioner? Is that a thing that it's actually happened yet, or just something that happens sometimes in the what ifs of the future? So maybe is that confirming? I don't remember well enough if Barbara has actually been the commissioner in main DC history, or if that's just a what if that's been played with for future stories. But in any case, it clearly says to me we're not in the early days. We maybe are not in the present day. I'm not sure, but going on. Batman says, where in his mind he was still going, still fighting, still trying to one-up me, more humane than that monster deserved, except I made sure, even in his wildest imagination, that I always won. What are you talking about? What did you do? I mean, I just feel like there's a whole lot of backstory here that they're expecting me to know, or content for me to not know. And if they're content for me to not know, it's just another way in which this story feels more confusing, and unnecessarily so. So then a moment later, if you're eagle-eyed, we do see that in the background, of this Batman kind of puzzling over the Joker. We do see the name tag Gordon and what looks like Barbara Gordon, and possibly from the art style we can guess that she's a little older, maybe closer to middle age. So maybe this is the future. I don't know. That's speculation. I wouldn't read too much into the art style. There's not a ton of detail. But he finds this note from the Joker saying, "I'll see you soon," and then what happens? We cut back to, I guess, a flashback of the early years of the Joker again. Again, they're not making that clear. Not that they have to. I think you can make stylistic choices like this, but again, one too many choices of this type can just leave me feeling like I want to give up. So in the internal narration, the voice of the Joker is saying, presumably to himself, "You can have your life back." And I don't know if that's supposed to represent what he's doing here, painting himself flesh-colored, sitting in a bar, and then ultimately just stirring up trouble by messing with people, saying ridiculous things that tick them off. Was this an attempt of the Joker to get back into normal life, but then his emerging psychosis wouldn't allow him to do that and just made him bring chaos wherever he went? Maybe. But there is, again, a reference to the Hood Gang and him being a part of it, so we are still tracking with the Joker that presumably was the Red Hood that fell into the vat of chemicals. Then a little later in his internal monologuing, the Joker says, "We can make them pay." I'm not sure exactly who he's referring to, but I'm not sure if I'm on board with revenge being a motivation of the Joker. I think it's more interesting when he has no discernible motivation much of the time, or at least not like one core motivation. I think when it comes to Batman, some core motivations do emerge from time to time, but I think most of the time you just can't predict what is driving the Joker, and that's really the way I prefer it. I think he's a lot scarier that way. On top of not being scary, the Joker is also at this point in his life able to be scared. The one thing that he is afraid of is Batman. When he sees a glimpse of him, he runs away and kind of like shames himself about it later on. He goes back to the water where he emerged after being dunked in the chemicals. He's talking to his reflection, which seems to be the voice that's been inside of him, trying to persuade him to not go completely insane. And then ultimately, he just chokes the life out of that reflection, that part of his mind, it would seem, saying, "Don't you understand? I am chaos." Well, this is overheard by someone who behind him says, "Chaos that fears isn't really chaos at all. I've been following you for months, and I'm impressed. I don't impress easily." And Joker says, "Who are you?" He says, "I'm the man who can teach you how to harness your mind to never feel fear again, to be the greatest force this world has ever known." And Joker says, "What exactly makes you qualified?" He says, "Because I'm the smartest man in the world, and I trained Batman." I don't know if I like where this is going. I don't know if I like the idea of the Joker becoming who he is in his completeness, in part by being trained, by going through mental training, like with some kind of Zen, whatever. I'm gonna fight the fear in my mind, and I think the Joker. I like the idea of the Joker being as capable as he is, and as driven as he is, because of something chemically that just went off the rails, so that his mind now is both broken and highly, highly functioning. And I think that could account for his tactical brilliance and planning. I think it could account for his survivability and how he can at times go toe-to-toe with Batman, at least for a little bit physically, that maybe he's just picking up things just as he lives life, as he watches Batman, picking up martial arts moves and stuff. There's just something that's been unlocked in his brain, even as major other portions of his brain are completely broken now. I really prefer that to just account for it. This kind of unknown thing that snapped in him that you could kind of say, yeah, I could see maybe that would be possible. There's so much about the human brain that we don't understand. And so, but still just suggesting and not making it clear cut, this is exactly how the Joker is able to do what he does. This is exactly what makes the Joker tick. I think that takes something significantly away from the Joker as a villain. So then we jump back to Batman musing on the last thing that the Joker told him, and then continuing his hunt to find him. And then he comments, "And now the whole situation is a nightmare of darkness. Somewhere in this city, Duke is infected." And that's the character Signal, if memory serves. And I was like, oh, infected. Is that a tie-in to the whole people turning into animal thing crossover beast world or whatever it's called that I've basically been ignoring because I'm not into anthropomorphic animals? It's like, okay, it must be referring to that. But then he goes on to say, and his powers are absorbing all the light, plunging Gotham into eternal night. They're all gone. I'm alone. Everyone's infected. An audible virus spread by laughter. And now the world is the Joker. And that's the big stinger. We see kind of a post-apocalyptic world where everyone walking around is the Joker. And I'm like, okay, so I think now these scenes with Batman are future flashes of some kind, of a what-if possibility of the future. I hope so, because if this is something I'm supposed to be aware of, or especially if it's supposed to be a tie-in to the whole animal crossover thing going on, then I'm completely lost. Either way, I mean, I'm interested to see where this goes, but I really would have preferred that they kind of finished up the Zur-Anar story before taking what is going to be this crazy rabbit trail that's probably going to go on for multiple issues, and by the time it's done, I'm going to be like, oh yeah, what was going on? Something Zur-Anar failsafe what? And I'm going to feel like I have to go back and read those again. It just feels like this is going to be too long and too abrupt and too massive of a detour from the main story. But I'm still interested. However, this is why I'm wearing the yellow ring this week. I'm not exactly fearful. I mean, there's a lot of emotions, like concerned is not on the emotional spectrum of the lantern rings, you know? So it's one more emotion than, or confused. So I was like, okay, well, I'm maybe concerned. I'm definitely confused. Probably the closest emotion is fear of some kind. I'm a little bit, even nervous is saying it that too strongly. I don't really care that much, but I mean, I'm like, I don't know. I'm not sure that I like where this is going. So the yellow ring seems like the best fit for this week, but I'm still very curious, and we'll see what happens with this comic next month. But yeah, I think those are all of my thoughts on comic books for now. Which of these books is getting your attention, or is there some other book that I didn't read or mention this week that you have some comments on? I would love to get reactions to what you're reading, what you're thinking, as always, in the comments below. And then remember to check out christiangeekcentral.com. Tons more content there. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye. For more chat about geek entertainment, answers to your questions, and news from the wider world of Christian geekery, get the Christian Geek Central podcast today on iTunes and other podcast services.